Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning for the poor schmucks that end up watching this. I mean, the great people out there. My name is Connell the Cigar, Connell the Cigar DM. I'm being joined by Shadow and the great benefactor, his son, and Ominow. We will be talking about the 1920 to 21's Weed, which was a Russian dystopian novel. It's the first of its kind. If there's another novel that beats this out of the gate, I don't know what it is, but this is what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to start with the great benefactor. I got a question for you there, Haas.
Yes.
Why this book? Do you not like dating? Do you not like free will? Do you not like body hair? Why this book?
Why did I? I'm still sick, just so you know. But why did I choose this book? Well, one, because I wanted to encourage myself to actually finish it. That was one reason. I was reading it, or more accurately, listening to it, and I realized that I hadn't listened to it in a long time. And I realized my choice was coming up. And one, I didn't have anything else. Two, we were talking about the subject of like transhumanism and stuff like that a while back. And I thought that this, though not connected, is still in the same sphere. I was not entirely sure what I thought of the book at the time. I wasn't like, I liked it, but I also didn't in some cases. And I realized when I say my choice was coming up, I don't mean that like, oh, I'm strapped for choice. I mean, because I chose this before we even reviewed, I think it was before, what did we review before Halloween?
Before we did.
You did Dresden Files, all I remember.
We haven't done Dresden Files in about 3 months, 4 months.
We need to get back to
it. A minute. Yeah, we need to get back to that one. I know we did The Island of Dr. Moreau. We did Conan. We did Halloween. Yeah, it's in October before Halloween.
I was thinking when he was talking about you were talking about books, because there's one time you said that you're going to review the Dresden Files, and I said, well, I'll just drop out of that one. So that's what I'm thinking for books.
Lucky you.
Oh, shut up.
I thought that you guys liked the Dresden Files, so
It's because in one of the books, the main character says assault weapon, and from then on, we just can't get around to listening to those, which isn't actually the reason why. It's just funny. But anyways, I chose this because, well, I was listening to it, and I thought, I'm probably not going to finish this. It'd been a week since I started. I need to encourage myself. It was still nowhere near my pick. Like, there were still several people, and then Halloween to get through. It wasn't right before Halloween. It was several weeks before it now that I remember. And then there were several weeks after. But I just knew this is what I want to talk about. No particular reason. I hadn't finished it. I'd only heard.
What attracted you to the book in the first place, bud?
What attracted me to the book? Well, I was doing just some general research on a bunch of stuff, and I just happened to come across it. I think I actually came across it via like music type stuff, because I know there's videos of the anthem of the one state, which in reality is just the international, but with like sirens playing in the background, and it's really, really echoey. So I don't think that counts, but I still like it. I think that just how I came across it was through that, and I started looking into it, like, oh, this is an actual book, and it was written like way before 1984, and all these other like famous dystopian books. I read a not necessarily review, but a comparison, or not read. I listened to a comparison that didn't actually have that many spoilers, and well, I found out that not only are the plots of the two books like incredibly similar to the point where it's kind of obvious that this book was a direct inspiration. And I realized, this might actually be like a decent pick, and it might be able to cleanse my reputation of only having awful choices when it comes to what we review.
It did.
I'll actually say that I thought it was one is I had never heard of this before, but boy, you can see it all through science fiction. I mean, we're going to be referencing that throughout.
Yeah, honestly, when I read through it, there was definitely parts where it made me think of H.G. Wells' Time Machine, because that even has a dystopia feel towards the end when he goes into the future with the people that live inside of the area and the people, Morlocks in the underground. Granted, this was not it, but there was still this similarity of the two enough of similarity that made me think of the Time Machine.
Oh, yeah, you're right with the Time Machine. I was also thinking Logan's Run.
Yeah,
Oh, God,
I think Logan's Run was written later on.
Well, that's my whole
hell
point.
yeah.
This is the starting point, with the exception of the Time Machine. Of
Yeah.
everything that goes forward. Look at, I saw stuff, whether it's Fahrenheit 451, Equilibrium, 1984. This seems to set the groundwork for all of them.
What I can never remember the numbers. THX whatever from Lucas.
1138 or something like that.
Right. I'll never get those numbers straight in my head. But
Yeah,
and I've never even seen that movie. But I can see from watching the previews of the movie, I can see the whole clear parallels to all of these novels.
Yeah, this is, if there is a story novel out there that predates this one, I would love to read it. But honestly, I think this is the one that gets us out the gates. When it comes to dystopia, at least in the modern era.
Yeah.
Everything in here you can see is just. Now, I'm not saying that they necessarily, but the idea sort of carried out, and I went, "Holy hell! It seems closer nowadays than it was back then."
Well, I think that's the genius of the book is how much insight into the future he had when writing this. That just snowballs out, and
1921.
If you look around, you can almost see it being used as almost like a playbook.
What amazes me is, and it's not just this, it's other Russian novels I've read. They seem timeless even when they're very dated. Anna Karenina, which is a very different book. The stuff that they're referring to in the book seems like they could just lift it if you just change the time frame.
Well, when was the space race? The 1960s was a space race. This book was basically talking about putting a rocket in space in the 1920s.
Not only putting a rocket into space, but having already done so. When he talks about the Martians and the Venusians and the Uranites and they're already there, which made me wonder why they were building another one.
The reason they're building the Integral, or whatever it's called, I think that's what it's called. That's how it's pronounced. The reason they're building it isn't so they can go to other planets within their own solar system. It's so that they can spread their ideas across the galaxy. Because they already have the solar system generally mapped out and stuff. But the actual the whole mission is to put people on the spaceship and then send them out and kind of just spread the message that they've crafted the perfect society, and they need to spread the message out into the galaxy.
Which is a horrifying thought. When coming up with questions for this one, I always go with who is your favorite character and so forth and so on. And you only really, other than the main guy, D, I'm bad with numbers.
503 or something like that.
Yeah, you got him.
That's the big downfall of this book. I think for all of us is the name/numbering system of the characters. He could have been a little bit more clever to make the numbers stick to us, because I couldn't remember.
It's D was the main guy. R was his the friend. Then there was O, that was his
lover.
Yeah,
something.
Corruptor.
Well, it was weird because, as much as he cared about her, he was just absolutely, psychotically obsessed with the other woman.
I-33.
Didn't he describe her later on as just being awful, completely unattractive?
I thought that it was her personality that made her unattractive to him.
I don't think loved exists.
No, because he described her as being yellow and flabby. When prior to that, she was, the supermodel. And I was like, when did that take place? As if it was like
Yeah.
Right, but it was almost as if like she was like a Cleopatra type of woman where it was all about her personality because Cleopatra was hideous, according to actual documentation. She was not attractive. It was her confidence and her charisma that got her where she was and her willingness to do these crazy things, not her actual physical beauty. And then he like, the blinders are off and she's like, oh, she's actually hideous. But at the same time,
I think he was
never
talking to
understood.
somebody else.
Was he?
Yeah.
I think he was talking about the teacher.
Yeah.
With the
I thought
gills.
the teacher. I thought the teacher was his girlfriend, so to speak.
No, that was not him. No, that's
No.
she was the bringer and ender of Stockholm syndrome. No, that wasn't.
Okay, I'll go through all the characters because I think I'm the only one who like remembers everything about most of them. So you have 503, the main character, the guy who's like he's writing the book. He's the main character guy. Then you have O. I don't actually remember her numbers, but O is his girlfriend, lover person. R is his best friend. Then S is the like high up guy. He's not the benefactor, but he's the guy who's
the guardian.
Yeah, the guardian. He's following him around, doing all that stuff. Then you have I-33, who's the woman in the story. And I don't actually remember what the teacher was. That's the only one who I don't remember the number.
Right.
I think it wasn't S. I know that. Who
was the black guy? Who was the black guy?
R.
Okay.
Yeah, R was the black guy.
Was that his friend or was that just somebody else?
It was a
No,
friend of his that he didn't, it was kind of weird. It was because
Well,
he
no,
was
R-
jealous of his friend because they slept with the same woman. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the whole situation going into that really, there was a part of me that was just going to try to avoid that, but you really can't with the pink cards and that whole.
Yeah.
The whole setup was we do not want you to have emotions. We don't want you to know what love is. We don't want you to know ... is. And
but at the same time, there was quite a bit of that. The times that he talked about hearing laughter off in the distance and things like that. I think it was more not so much unemotional, but unconnected, unattached to one another.
Right.
Unless you got registered, which I took for the euphemism of actually getting married.
No,
really.
there was no marriage.
It wasn't marriage in any way. It was just like you sign something and like on these days you need to go do things because it was because they realized when they're making their big brain vision for how the world should be that people like love still exists and people still want to frick. So let's just have it so they like sign things and have it be like scheduled and all this stuff so that we've conquered it. People no longer have envy and desires of that sort. Lust no longer exists because it's just you want to do this and that. All right, set up a day here, and you now that you've set it up, it's mandatory.
Yeah, children was made by the state, not by individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just everybody had access to everybody else's body. Pick your favorite actress as of right now, and register. Go to your local place. You type in their number and say, "I'd like to have access to said person at this date." That's how that was handled. There was no making of families. There was no marriage.
Yeah. And though it isn't a Brave New World scenario where the new people, the children, are quite literally created by the state for specific purposes, but you do need every single, if somebody wants to create a new person, it's not like, oh, I want to have a child and raise a family. It's just, you now need to create a child because
we're running low.
A new person, and you, like, if you're too short, too fat, you have some undesirable characteristic, you're not going to get chosen, and you're not going to be allowed anyways. But they're going to say, hey, you have desirable characteristics, so you need to now create a new person for the state.
It's Gattaca and eugenics, except done by the state instead of the individuals.
In this book, it was very much They didn't really get into it. I had a feeling there was some baby factory that just cranked out kids, X amount of kids every so often.
I kind of got the feeling that you applied for it, and then they said okay, and then you were just basically a womb, and as soon as the child was born, they took it away, and
maybe got paid extra.
I was very upset about that thought. I was, visibly shaken by the fact that she would lose her child. I still,
she was going to lose the child and lose her life because she broke the law.
Right. Which is insane. But I still, I just finished the book about an hour ago, and the ending just, I don't know, I don't understand what happened. It was just like,
put it this way: I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than having a full lobotomy.
Frontal,
yeah.
Do you know where that comes from? Where that comes from?
Tom Wells.
And?
Oh, I don't know. I just know Tom Wells.
Okay, I thought it came from the song Existential Blues.
Oh. Well, if you want me to explain the ending, I can.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll get to that. We just got started.
We'll get there later.
Let's get through the book. I think the concept of one state, a global planet that is just one government, I don't per se have an issue with that concept. I think in some ways it will solve some problems but create other complications, but that's just the nature of it.
Look at the Balkans. That one region has countries smaller, well, not literally smaller than Delaware, but very small countries which are always on the brink of collapse due to ethnic tensions. You go to Africa, you have millions of different tribes that all see each other as the enemy. They hate each other, despite the fact that if anyone from anywhere else on the world would look at this area, they're like, you're all black, you're all Arab. No, they see it as we're all completely distinct and we need to kill each other. And if it was up to them, Africa would be thousands of tiny little countries. Each city would be independent. If you tried to unite that, it collapsed in a matter of months.
Well, to be fair, Europe was like that.
Yeah, no,
because when I was in Germany, Frankfurt was its own place, and what was it, Hanover? No,
Well, yeah, Germany used to be thousands of small duchies and princedoms and whatever other name they could come up with, all loosely united under the Holy Roman Empire, but they were essentially independent.
Jack,
well, I mean, you have free cities and stuff. I just want to mention this is, this idea of these giant super states that we have now really didn't exist until probably the last couple of 100 years. I mean,
yeah.
Well, I mean, even when I was in Iraq, people think of it as one country. It's not even three countries. They have all sorts of different ethnic groups, and people forget about that.
I was saying, I think having one, as if we're 1,000 years from now, we're still on, we haven't blown each other up yet, and we're now doing space travel. Having one federal government, having one whatever as a planet Earth would be a whole lot easier than, what we have now when it comes to dealing with stuff out in space.
Yeah, I do agree on that front, that as time progresses, the countries used to be very small, and as time progresses, the average size of countries gets larger. And eventually mostly because we're now having other planets, eventually there will be a sort of, not necessarily one world government, but just one world is not that big of a concept anymore.
Star Trek, like kind of a Star Trek federation.
Right, but we've got a long way to go to get there, folks.
Oh, yeah.
If Russia wants Mars, they can have it.
And if it's not ruled by the Habsburgs, I'm not okay with it.
That's okay. No. I like people with chins myself.
Greece can have Jupiter, or Pluto, but whatever.
Here's my view: is Mars should be for Martians. So when you go there, you get away from the whole Earth, and Earth no longer has control over it. Let the people who actually inhabit the area control. I mean, but that's
never going to happen. No.
That's an old
story. The big corporations already know what happens if they fund the colonization of a world. They want to own it because they paid for it. That's why it's not happening, because no one can control it. Eventually, whoever lives on Mars will declare their independence from Mars. I mean, from Earth, and the Earthlings who financed it are like, no, we made the investment. We want the investment forever. That's why we made the investment.
Hello.
That's why we have it done.
Moon is a harsh mistress.
Yeah.
Which may be another one that we look at in the future. But
That's a funny once. You remember that line?
well,
right. I want to go back to characters really quick though, because
Yes.
picking out a favorite character in this book is nonsense. It doesn't really work. I mean, I could say my favorite character is the Great Dictator. Just why not?
well,
But
the other part is talking about that is we talk about this one world government, but then as soon as they break outside of the wall, you find this whole other group out there, which reminds me of Buck Rogers whenever they talk about their cities and then outside of the cities, and you kind of go,
or even Logan's Run, the TV show.
Yes.
Yeah, because I originally thought that this was at the very least a Eurasian state. Maybe not the whole world. You have because they said something about wars and stuff, but I thought that the 200 Years War. I thought that at the very least it was a state encompassing all of Eurasia, but in the end, it almost seemed like it was just one city.
What kind of made me feel, and I said this to Shadow earlier this week, it feels like this is not apocalypse, not dystopia. When the world's gone to the end, it's gone to shit, and the only people who are left are a few people. There's a term for that, and I can't think what it is off the top of my head. Post-apocalypse. This is a post-apocalyptic. It starts a post-apocalyptic book that turns into a world. This turns into a dystopia because they talk about the 200-year war, which basically destroyed the freaking planet. Then now they have this, which turns into a dystopia.
But what's interesting though is when you find out, spoiler at the end for the benefactor, didn't you see me outside the wall as well? And you kind of go, oh wait a minute,
No, that wasn't the benefactor. That was S.
Okay. I must have misheard it. But when they're talking about it, it says you didn't give me away, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then the whole thing that I got the feeling of was kind of what I want to say. Anyone that's ever looked at Mega City from
Judge
Dredd, which is they act like oh well we've got this and we everything's perfect, and if you go along we're going to do this, and then you find out there's a wasteland beyond it, and they talk about 0.2% or something like that survived, and then you find out no, there's a group that survived outside of it, and they just kind of pretend they don't exist. That's what I thought was interesting. They all just
that was kind of actually a bit of a surprise for me that there were people and they were doing just fine.
That part actually doesn't surprise me. I mean, I don't want to.
It surprised me in the fact that with their technology, they should have been able to just eliminate them if that's what they wanted, but instead they literally couldn't. They couldn't stop it. So they had to just pretend like it wasn't there.
All the technology that this book had felt like it was all inwards. Don't look outside. There's nothing outside for you. Don't look that way. And
there's only two opaque surfaces in the entire city, and it's that one house and the big wall.
Right. And we have you in this nice little cage. We'll give you petroleum to eat. We'll let you have shenanigans with whoever you want to have shenanigans with. Just do as you're told. Be nice little pets and live in your fish tank. That's how the book really felt to me.
Hey, it's modern day.
Kind of.
Yeah.
With a lot more glass.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have the glass. Well, nowadays, we're all joking about this, but somewhere all this is being recorded in some servers in Utah. We're talking about this right now. So
you're saying the Mormons are going to be taking over?
No, that's just part of the Patriot Act.
Oh, well, Utah Mormons. Never mind. Bad joke. I just once again, I just kind of want to go back to the characters because the characters, I think the most interesting, I won't say favorite because I don't like the word favorite for this one, but I think I was probably the most interesting. She was the most, to me, the most free character.
The one that
Uh,
smoked and drank and
It's I-33.
yeah.
Yeah, she to me she was a spy. She was technically in a roundabout way the villain and the hero all at the same time.
She was the subversive. I mean, we always see this in whatever's in there, which is what they take for all sorts of stuff. I mean, look at Equilibrium and things like that. Where even when you take other books like Moon is a Harsh Mistress, there's always someone in there, and it's usually a woman that gets the main character into trouble. But I think that it's also a reflection that. I mean, I kind of liked her for that. I mean, anyone that's also seen Soylent Green, where they had the furniture,
Right.
It's the same thing of, well, I'll just follow whatever's there, and you start realizing there's something else out there, and it awakens, by having this person, it awakens that in because they represent freedom, and I think I don't want to say favorite character because, to be honest, the characters weren't really that important. Per se, it was. I felt like
I disagree. The main character, that's what I was loving about the book, was how the main character, his writing, his narration was so. Maybe it was because of the narrator, the audio book that I listened to. I don't know if it's the same one you guys all listen to.
Most
but
likely,
he was so good. He was so good at it of portraying the hypocrisy and the humor and the whole feel of it, while at the same time you could picture him as this, totally Ichabod Crane-like character, but yet he was, incredibly important, but slowly telling us all these things that we could see, but he can't see yet. It was that whole show me, don't tell me sort of writing style that it was so superb. And the more I'm listening to it, and then I'm watching his frustration over feeling things and realizing things that he didn't want to, and that whole conflict within himself was just so well done for something that I hate to say it this way, for something that was so written so long ago. It was just amazing writing. Maybe it was the translator who helped. I don't know. But it was
good literature. Good literature is timeless. It doesn't matter if it was written in time of.
Yeah.
Look at the Three Musketeers. Three Musketeers, the novel, still hold up to a lot of the modern stuff that we have now. Good writing is just good writing, and especially when it's well thought out.
I'm going to say this much as anyone that's not that I've gotten through all of it, but just the beginning of the Iliad, where you hear Achilles berating and some of the insults that come out of there, you just go, "Holy hell!" And you look at nowadays, and it's just kind of, well, F you, F this, and like that is not a good insult. The best insults, whether it's Casablanca or something, is where they have Hugh Laurie staring, and he goes, "Rick, I know you despise me." And Rick goes, "Well, if I ever gave you a thought, I guess I would." I mean, you have to, I think that's what's missing in a lot of modern aspects. And I think part of the problem that we have is these people are not reading the classics. They're not learning on how to write. And then the other part is that somehow they think they can do better instead of understanding what makes everything so great and then capitalizing on that and expanding it out in areas that they didn't do. And we can always talk about that, but that's why I think, this book was, how do I want to put it? It had tons of interesting ideas. It did not have a lot of characters when you look at it.
Not really.
I've at most.
And it's an exploration of his feelings. You don't hear any of the other characters except through his voice. I mean, it's first person writing for him. Why did I feel this? Why did I feel that? And you can feel that he's disgusted, and then he's intrigued, and he's ashamed. And when we talk about alignments, here's your perfect lawful person that meets a chaotic and wants to, both embrace it and then is completely disgusted by the fact that he can't rule himself. And he talks about, oh, well, they've done all these great things and helped prevent, emotions and
how
emotions.
perfect everything is with its symmetry and
And-
order.
Describing that kind of world through mathematics and how absolutely perfect, objectively perfect everything is. And he's saying it, and you're just like, you can't imagine how any person could be saying this stuff without just laughing. I think one of the lines is like,
Right.
imagine living in freedom.
Yeah, well, he does that, and emotions, and I mean, it's
Oh,
just that
when-
things that we take for granted. And to be fair, if you look at the Soviets, they tried stamping out tons of stuff for that.
Yeah.
Well, when he went to the doctor because his, actual feelings were, being created in him, which something he's not used to, the doctor who works for the other side was, oh, by the way, I think you caught a soul.
Yeah,
I mean,
A soul.
a
He's
soul.
like-
And like,
he's like, remove it.
Right.
Get rid of it.
How dare
I'm
I
sorry,
say
you're not ginger. We have nothing for you. But
even the aspect of dreaming, that's the other part that gets me.
Oh, I know. I remember that.
Yeah.
That was like, what?
there's a lot of things.
Dreaming is a sign of a serious mental illness.
Right. There's things in this book. I kind of want to read it again here
I
soon,
will read it again.
just to make sure I caught everything, because I'm sure there's things that slip through. But when the concept of dreaming, having a soul, having emotional feelings for somebody else is discarded.
We have to remember one thing though, and I think this is the point that was kind of blown out when you had Niels Bohr come out. The idea, and you see this in Star Trek a lot, is the idea that if you get the right equation, you can always know the answer. And that was kind of blown apart when they started doing the quantum stuff and the variability and things like that. So that's where you get Einstein saying God does not play with dice. This is a time when they thought that science could solve everything. And whether it's eugenics, eugenics was a big thing in this time period. The idea of how he gets kind of confused about -1, the square root of -1.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, so what? And it just shows on how much he gets into there. And the whole thing with the ship called Integral. I mean, come on, that's calculus right there. The whole thing is that math will provide you the correct answers to peace and prosperity. And as we know now, it does not. And I think that it's back then that was the idea, is if we can just solve all of the answers, we can find the one true path. And I think that's part of what he was going at here is, but you've got variables that you can't account for that are emotions. And when
the human factor, you can't count the human factor. The moment you think as a species we're going to go left, we'll go right, or straight ahead. You can't.
Yeah.
And this book was kind of disgusting in that sense, that they got us dialed down at the benefactor and his cronies over however long this was taking place has dialed down humans so much that I think I don't want to say ants, like ants have more emotion than we do.
Yeah.
But
well, you think that we're just moist robots?
There was no. I mean,
that is the goal of the one state. Is the only thing preventing math from solving math can solve all our problems. If it wasn't for that one variable, that's freedom. And if we can get rid of freedom and emotions, then we can predict everything that happens ever, and we can map it all out, and everything will be perfect.
There was no dogs. The only animals that they talked about were birds.
Well, didn't the birds come in after the wall fell or something like that?
Yeah.
I don't think the wall fell.
Part of the wall did break down. Because in the end of the story, there is the revolution, like I-33, her revolution that she was working with. It is partially successful. And there is a lot of chaos That's the whole reason that the procedure or the operation that gets rid of all your freedom and all your brain, the crown jewel of the one state,
Yeah.
it is only brought in at the end because the benefactor realizes that his grip and his perfect society is slowly crumbling. And if he can bring this out now and stop it, things will revert back to normal and anything will be perfect and mathematical. But even after the end, like the ending says, like I hope we win because reason always wins. Being like the last line is, it's not certain. The of this world isn't certain. There is a possibility that because the part of the wall came down, people can see outside of it. Even though a lot of people did get the operation, a lot of people didn't, and those people that didn't are fighting against it. So there is a huge chance that at the end of the story,
his former partner the former partner that wanted to get pregnant, who got pregnant, she ended up on the other side.
And then there was which I thought she got pregnant too, and they were.
No, I didn't get pregnant, but she got. I mean, she
was 3 times, and she would not give up anything before they killed her. That's what got me. Like, okay, but yeah, but we can see this in all of these films. I mean, anyone that's seen Equilibrium, it's Equilibrium. I'm sure that's V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
Pieces. I mean, there's lots of little bits in there.
Well,
and that's what makes it so timeless. Is they're mining all these ideas in this book for Fahrenheit 451 and all the other things. And then the other part that, if you look at the Russians, during this time frame, it was very stoic. It was an interesting. We start looking at the Gulag Archipelago. That everyone acts like things are very monolithic, but boy, when you read the book, there were so many things that went out of the way, and people just how they gummed up the system, and some of it's pretty funny.
It didn't work, and if it was going to work anywhere, and by it I obviously mean communism or socialism or however you want to categorize it. If it was ever going to work, it would have worked there. Because they had everything going for it, the climate, the terrain, all these, immutable factors that they could never control working in their favor. And the human spirit still said, no, thanks.
Well,
look at North Korea right now. Look at the defectors from North Korea and just seeing how brainwashed they are. And you can see that in this person here. And,
right.
And you go like, well, wait a minute.
D is not first generation, second generation, or fourth generation. He's got to be
20 generations. It's been a thing for a while.
Right, which is weird because I was wondering the whole time
to have that title.
How the great benefactor was chosen each new generation or what have you.
He wasn't chosen. I'm pretty sure he wasn't chosen. There was no. Well, I'm pretty sure it was one family that was in charge of everything.
It might be like the Kim dynasty, how it's an unofficial monarchy. But I think the way that the next benefactor is chosen after the current one dies is just whoever the current benefactor wants to be the next guy. It doesn't necessarily have to be a member of the same family. It could be, but it's just the guy, he chooses somebody and just nobody questions it. That next guy is going to be the benefactor.
Well, we'll see. I kind of look at it as very similar to what they have in China, which is the party chooses. And so it's not hereditary, but did you notice? And everyone will vote for the benefactor, and anyone who does not is a rebel. I'm like, well, how is that really choosing someone?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I had a professor one time hand me some candy, and she held it out. And I went for the piece of candy. She says, no, not that one. Then why did you put it in your hand? That's the same way I felt about this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If they would have said, the benefactor at the end of the book was basically a robot in our artificial intelligence, I would have said, okay, that makes sense too.
Yeah.
I mean, everything about this book was very cold, mechanical, and AI.
And
I think just that concept hadn't come about yet.
AI.
I mean, we're talking 1920s. I can see how that was just not yet, in the zeitgeist out there in the ether. It was just not a concept that was really available.
Or if it was the preliminary aspects. But we really didn't have computers at that time. The idea was that we had math, but no computers. So people
There
had
was
to figure out the right choice.
he was either an Italian or a Frenchman who built a automaton that would play chess. And this was in the early 1900s.
No, that was actually fake. It was someone inside it.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened with it.
Well, no. I'm not saying that it was real, but the idea was already out there.
It was, but you have to remember when they started doing this. Just like I know that we all talked about. I'm sure Shadow remembers this when we were kids. That if we can get a computer to play chess that will beat any person, then that's representative intelligence. And we're kind of laughing at that now. Because at the end of the day, even when Deep Blue beat Kasparov, I had to laugh because they kept tweaking it with programmers. They said what it said was 323 programmers can beat a chess master. That's what it really came down to. But it wasn't an AI per se. Well, even when you see the algorithms and how people troll the algorithms and they get all mad like, it's an algorithm. We have no control of it. Bull. You're the ones that program it. But I think that it was but it's still the idea that the math, if you can do math, you can find the right answer. And so there wasn't an AI aspect, I think, to it. But it was, you're told who the benefactor is. You're completely brainwashed, which is very similar to what they did to the Soviets. And it's like, well, you can vote for someone else, wink, wink. And if you vote for someone else, we know what to do with you. So that's why it's like, they won the election 98.9%. And I said, so who's the 1% that didn't vote, and where did they go off to?
Well, it doesn't matter.
I'm going camping. I'll be back.
Yeah, like in this.
Was anybody else impressed with the writer's actual math skills, or is it just me?
I'm not a mathematician by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm pretty sure
he wove it throughout the whole story and his actual understanding of higher math, etc. It's actually surprising that that's what he chose to do, was not be a mathematician. He chose to write this story that for all intents and purposes could have got him in a lot more trouble than he got.
I mean, he was part of the Bolshevik Party for a long time. He only started criticizing totalitarianism and stuff like that after the Russian Civil War, or more accurately during it, and when he saw the effects and the methods and actually lived under the system that he had advocated for, that he realized maybe this isn't actually the greatest thing. Which is why he started writing stuff like this.
And I don't know. It's one of these things that, for me, when I start hearing some of things, I'm like, okay, you're up to calculus 2. Which is rare to hear anyone use it. When he started using, I as the imaginary square root of 1, I was like, oh, that's pretty clever. I think in some cases is if they were well educated, and especially back then, it's not like it is now where you really specify what major you get. You tend to have humanities in many cases. So you got your if you got a good education, you learned everything to make you a well-rounded person.
It's funny that you bring that up. I was even thinking about that when the book was with my daughter, and not my daughter, but it was an educational thing I had to go to, but for my daughter. And one of the women there was bitching at one of the teachers. She said, I see no reason why my daughter should have to learn Spanish or some other language. This is America. She only needs to learn how to speak American. And me being me, I'm like, so what is the official language of America? She's like, English. I'm like, try again, because there is no official language of America.
It is in English. It really is English.
But there isn't.
In all
No. Trust me, it's in English. If you look at how all the rules and stuff are.
Oh yeah. Well,
But
when
Well,
you
not only
practice,
that,
it's
I know
English, but on
for a
paper,
fact that if you go to just about any other country, you will find English is the most popular, like, second language.
Yeah.
When I went to Mexico before Jackie was born. I went by myself on a bus, not to the border, but deep into the heart of Mexico. And everywhere I went, people spoke English.
I guess
They
what I'm
saw
trying
me.
to what I'm trying to say that it was a point of pride, a badge of honor when you could speak more than your just native tongue, where you were able to speak Spanish, French,
Oh,
German.
those days are gone, buddy.
Yeah, well, they need to come back.
I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Here's the thing that gets me about it is it's not. You learn your language better if you learn another language. When I started learning German, I understood English a lot better. So that improves your grammar from that aspect. However, I think that really the ability to speak multiple languages, and you had to in the United States in the early 20s, and before then, you had to speak French and German if you wanted to be well educated. And that's true of a lot of the Russians and everything else, because they did all the mathematics. It wasn't until post-World War II that all of the great scientists came to the United States, and that's what made English. And then the internet, when the internet came about, that was the other aspect.
Yeah.
However, and I'm going to be honest about this, looking towards the future. And I knew this when I was a kid, that there were 3 languages that you should learn, and it wasn't Spanish. Generally, it was Chinese, Arabic, and Russian. Well, and the Russian really fell out of favor for that, but really Arabic and Chinese. But even when I was in Iraq, almost everything was in English, even though they had other stuff. But we conducted a lot of things. The drawings were in English. A lot of stuff was in English. So it's not so much that aspect. Even when I was in Germany, we had someone specifically say that. He says, "You're so lucky you only have to learn one language." This was a German student that picked me up. He says, "You're so lucky you only have to learn one language. You don't have to learn everything else." But I think I really don't care if my mechanic can speak multiple languages. I want him to fix my damn car. And if if he can fix the car, that's fine. And I did have a professor who specifically, he had a Russian counterpart because he worked for NASA at one point. They got rid of the translator because the translator couldn't understand what they were saying. And they just purely worked on mathematics and drawings. And that's how, because they could communicate better that way. So I don't want to get into like what, because the real question is, what should you learn? And then is that useful?
Mandarin, English, and Spanish. Those are the 3 languages.
In the West, that's true. If you're in Africa, you should know French. If you're in the Middle East, you should learn Arabic. Mandarin is probably. Well, right now, it's like the question is what are your 2 biggest countries right now? It's China and India. So you probably should be learning Hindu and Mandarin for the future.
Oh no, not Hindu, because they speak better English than we do.
India does speak a lot of English. More than
they were ruled by the British for how long?
A while.
And they have 1,000 different languages in India. I mean, there's a lot of it. But I met a Russian lady, and the Russians had numerous ones. It's not one way or the other. It amazes me, even when you go to in the South, there are lots of people that don't speak Spanish. You think that that they would, and you're like, just like my friend, his family's from Panama. Well, half of his family. His other half's from Poland. But I find it interesting that his wife, who is from Mexico, complains about his Spanish. You need to learn Mexican Spanish and stop learning this Castilian Spanish.
No Adams family here.
This is the best form of Spanish. I get that.
But, going back to what Shadow was saying about the math, I've read this and I've heard this in multiple different sci-fi books and shows. Math is the only true language out there. And this author who was able to write the book using math, the concept of math as not a second language, but a same language as Russian, because this book wasn't originally written in English; it was written in Russian.
Right.
It was quite brilliant. The fact that somebody took the time to translate it in English which translating Russian to English is always a fun trick, but also doing the math aspect to it. I mean, there's 30 minutes before the story starts with the author talks, because I'm pretty sure we've all listened, where he's talking about the translation. Anybody in Russia who knows the books, you're translating into what? Good luck, was the feel I got from it.
Well, I think that's true of anything. Is my family was from Greece, and they would talk about everything. And I've tried looking at different translations of the Iliad, and it is so hard to convey both the language and especially with the Iliad, because it has a certain because it is it's poetry, which means it's supposed to be spoken at a certain
rhythm. Yeah.
And we just you can't translate meter that way. You have to literally have it. Here's English and what it says, and then this is what it sounds like in Greek. And you have to read one as you're listening to the other to really get the impact sometimes. But I will say as much: almost all of the Russians I've met, and it's not entirely fair because you are only the most educated ever get left Russia for the most part. But the Russians I met were far both more cynical and very well. They have a dark sense of humor.
Oh, which I appreciate.
I love the dark senses of humor from Russians. I like the fact that they were, they kind of know that life is suffering, and so they're willing to accept that. So they have this kind of tongue-in-cheek thing. It's not like the United States, which this is where we're getting to now. But before it was like we go and we'll conquer the world, and the Russians are just kind of like, we'll win after we lose, half of our population. I mean,
there's a scene in the Armageddon movie where there's going on something going on with the ship, and you had that Russian astronaut banging on that thing. American components, Russian going, bam, 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 all the way to Taiwan. And it just, I don't know, that scene always stuck with me. But no, the dark humor, Russian dark humor, quite amuses the ever-living hell out of me. And maybe it's because I started my educational life in Europe when I was basically had to be able to speak French, Italian, English, of course, and Latin because I was Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
But those three languages are all based off of each other at Latin roots anyways. And I don't know, but going back to the book, translating this book from Russian to English, whoever did it did a really good job.
Several people did it. There are several
people.
Sure.
Yeah, there are several translations. George Orwell originally read a French translation in, I believe, 1947.
Right.
But I think that they got the concepts in there. Sometimes you miss, and maybe they did. We don't know because I'll be honest. I've been trying to learn Russian, and I can probably go Das Svidanya and a couple of other things. But
just throw it to Max, have him read it to us.
But you always lose something in the translation. I mean, even when I was in Germany, I used to listen to the German. I would watch the German. No, I'm sorry. It was an English film, and then they put the subtitles in German. Okay, so I would knew exactly what they were saying, and I knew a little bit of German. And I look at the bottom like that's not the phrase that they mean. The perfect example is
right. Yeah, I've learned that over the years, watching some Spanish translations or.
Oh yeah, most Spanish translations are garbage.
Yeah, no, that's not what they just said. It's not even close. So I have to wonder, even here, how much of it was somebody else's work that made what I just listened to as good as it was, especially considering how many basically a century has gone by. I have to wonder how much of the real spirit of the book, the real translation, are we getting? I'm hoping we're getting a really good account of what was intended originally.
Yeah, because I did see I watched a review of the book immediately after I finished it, and they quoted something, and it was the part where he was diagnosed with having a soul. And in that one, I think it was, in that version, he was diagnosed with they didn't say soul in that one. They said something else. I don't remember what it was. It wasn't,
or I don't know.
It was, I think it started with an F, but I know it wasn't. It might have been imagination, or no, it was fantasy. It was fantasy, which was what he was diagnosed with. So I assume that's just a poor translation, because that
That
doesn't.
That is a very weird sidestep from soul to imagination. I mean, that's
no, for fantasy.
Fantasy.
I'm going to bring this up is we have to realize that sometimes they're not direct translations for words. So something that we would say as a direct translation has a different meaning in the language. So even if it was the direct translation says, no, this is a fantastical imagination, we would probably still say, no, soul probably is a better phrase for that. But you know what? I think that's a word that I had. I'd have to go look at it in Russian. Sometimes, and I had this years ago, but I wish that they would have a word for word, not word for word, but on one page it would be Russian and on the other page it would be English, so you could look at it. But that said, I listened to the audiobook. I thought the audiobook was pretty good. I did listen on 2x speed, so I'm sure I missed stuff while I was playing video games. But,
great.
You missed. I think what you would have missed most is the narrator's ability to portray this character so well.
Yes.
The nuances of his voice, the just the whole character he put into it. Just getting the words. I know. I was thinking while I was listening to it, if I was to try to read this, I wouldn't get past page like 20 from boredom. The individual who did the actual narration was superlative. His ability to go beyond just the mere words and read it, everything about that is what amused me and was enjoyable about it. Otherwise, I would not have been able to make it through this book.
I was maybe about 30 minutes in the book and listening to the book, driving. I'm like, I don't know, Jack. This is going to be one of those. I'm going to give it an honest go, and I did. But I'm like 30 minutes into this book, and I'm like, I'm going to start drinking if I'm going to make my way through this book. And it turned out, no, I just put it on Audible and listened to it when I was in the car. And the fact that he said record 1, record 2. Whenever we got to a new record, that's when I killed it. That's when I stopped the tape. If I had something else to do, it was a natural stop. Yeah, and I appreciated that.
I mean, I'll be honest with this. I thought that it was a very, very good book. I did. But you know what the style of writing reminds me of is Heinlein.
Really, I was thinking almost Lovecraft for a while.
Really? Actually, I haven't read them.
Here's the reason I was thinking Heinlein, because Lovecraft does such good visuals with so few words. So it really gets your imagination sparking. This one reminds me of Heinlein, where he goes more for the concept and the feelings of the person. So I don't really...
I guess I was thinking more of the typical Lovecraftian character that doesn't realize what he's getting himself into. That whole aspect of blindly walking into oblivious to the horrors that are all around him. Because
but this wasn't blindly walking into it. This was being dragged by his
easily see Lovecraft having read this at some point.
I can see that, but I meant the writing style. It's definitely because Heinlein is fairly sparse on specific details. He'll mention ideas in there. And then, the feelings, like even with Starship Troopers, he describes the armor, but the armor, everyone that draws the armor draws it differently for the most part, which I find very interesting. Whereas certain people are so good at descriptions. But yeah, I mean, Heinlein is one. I talked to one years ago. She was talking about the difference between Anne Rice and Heinlein. Says Anne Rice says, "Oh, he comes to the door and you notice the wood and blah blah blah." Goes through this whole thing. And she says, Heinlein, he walks the door, it dilates, he goes through. That's it. It's like it's a door. She doesn't describe it. And that's what I mean by that. I mean, he does describe the smoke and stuff like that. He does describe some of that aspect. The liquor.
The green liquor.
Well, which reminds me of
I think I think that's what she was drinking when he said green liquor absinthe. And I'm like,
that or mouthwash.
That wasn't mouthwash.
But that explains why, just with like, what was it, one glass or so, he's like, oh,
Right,
I mean,
right.
Well, you never had
Then
alcohol.
again,
Yeah, but absence of the 187 proof.
I'm not saying that you're wrong, but if you've gone your entire life without having anything alcohol, and you get something that's over 100 proof, whiskey, it's going to knock your socks into the dirt just because you never had it before. And between the intoxicatingness of the tobacco that he's never been around before, I mean, his senses had to be going nuts at that point.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, Jack.
Which is really weird if you think about it. A society like that would probably have, some sort of drug or reward system, some chemical.
It was the pink card.
Well, that's not
beyond
a
that.
No, didn't they have drugs for them that was kind of to numb them rather than trying to give them pleasure?
I didn't feel that. I see reading it. I figured sex was the reward for falling in line.
Well, I mean, when he went to the doctor for not feeling well, I thought it was kind of that aspect of remove it. It was just the same thing when he was starting to dream. It's like you have to give me something to end this, and it kind of felt like under a normal circumstance they would give him. I had a friend of mine who actually went to an insane asylum, and they gave them drugs, and he was like real fast and stuff, and it was just like, it's like they removed his soul. I mean, he'd have to.
Yeah. Things like Thorazine, etc., will just absolutely just devastate your ability to function, just function. Period. Let alone with any sort of normalcy. It's like, a walking sedative. You are literally, chemically lobotomized. I've known people that have been on things like that, and the difference between drugged up and not, just absolutely staggering. And I would think that they would try to come up with something a little more, okay, remember in Rollerball when Don Houseman hands out the little white pills as a reward, something like that, that they would be fully in favor of something like that. But I think
this society is, they're not one that, it's not like 1984 where like the past is illegal. It's not one where like, just don't worry about it. It's embarrassing. We don't want to talk about it. They look at stuff in the past isn't like, it's not blocked off. It's not hidden. What happened in the past is public knowledge to everyone. And it seems like they aren't even changing. Yeah, everyone has open access to history, and the state
with the building
isn't changing it at all. It's just that the people see normal activities and normal behaviors of the past as absolutely repulsive and illogical. So you'd imagine that drug use is something that they wouldn't use to like, oh, you've done good, here, have some drugs. It's like, why would you want to use drugs? Like, that's just, like, happiness is a word and term that's used a lot in especially the latter half of the book. So everyone's happy now. Everything is perfect. Why would you want to use drugs which harm your physical body and they might make you happier, but we've already made perfect happiness here anyway, so we don't need drugs. So
but I do it this way:
they just don't think they're necessary.
Yeah,
but the drugs aren't for happiness. The drugs would be to remove doubt. That's the way that I felt about it was. When you went to the doctor,
critical thinking. When you're too busy just trying to walk, thinking about anything else, trust me, some of those medications that exist, you're lucky if you can, remember to wipe your ass, let alone have a thought about anything else.
Hold up. Okay. When you're saying it like that, it could be that they use drugs during like pregnancies and stuff to make people more susceptible. But as you see in the beginning of the book, the brainwashing has already been done to the entire population.
Right.
Even the benefactor, the supreme leader, probably is just as brainwashed as your average person. It's been so long. There's been so many generations of this stuff that every single person, with a few exceptions, like I and the one doctor guy, they're all entirely brainwashed into this society. They don't need drugs to make them more compliant because they're already perfectly compliant.
Hold it, but that's not what I'm. Well, but what happens when doubt comes in is the point. It's not that they use the drugs for the normal person. They use it when you die. I mean, you can even see it today in the modern psychology where they start adding disorders, anti-authoritative disorder.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell is that? And what it is, oh, you're just defiant to your teacher. You talk back. And then they're like, you know what? Here, go over to the doctor, see him. We'll make sure that we give her those pesky dreams. That's what he was talking about. Is the whole thing of it's not they're not using drugs in the way that they did in 1984, where if you don't use the drugs, you'll get this withdrawal or anything else and you'll be unhappy. It's kind of the thing of, you know what, you're not thinking right. Let's give you some drugs to dampen those emotions.
Let's fix you like the packs.
Well, that kind of would, if that is a thing that they would have done, we would have seen it.
Two things.
Instead, it was the operation.
Two things really quick. Jade is on the other side of the screen listening to us. I don't think I could talk him into jumping in if my life depended on it. Trust me, I thought about this.
He can come around your shoulder.
He hasn't read the book, but he's listening to us, and I always appreciate his input on things. His thought processing was the happiness was the drug.
Yeah.
The chains that were put around these people's necks. This is my point. The chains that are put around these people's necks to fall in line. They had no freedom. Therefore, the non-existent freedom was happiness. They knew what they had to do every day. They knew what the responsibility was. And by doing that, it made them freedom. There was no doubt. There was no shame. There was no nothing. You just did.
Yeah, they called their state of being unfreedom for a reason.
Right. So that was the drug. That was their happiness was the drug. That's what kept them in line.
I'm going to disagree with that. I'm going to say as much. Anyone that's actually read the Gulag Archipelago, there's things in there where the people, when you talk about being brainwashed so much, and which is where he's going through it, that when they were thrown in the Gulag, they're like, this is some mistake. This can't be right. I'm going to write to Stalin, and he's going to carry.
Fuck Stalin.
No. Literally, if you read the book, they would be writing off to Stalin. Said, "Oh, it's a mistake. Stalin will correct this because he's the great benefactor." That's kind of the way that they treat that. It's the whole thing of, and he says those people would eventually just have their souls crushed instead of the people who actually realized.
Going back to that time period, I don't know who was fucking worse, Hitler or Stalin, because they were both fucking monsters.
Stalin, if you look at the number of deaths, Stalin's number 2. Yeah. Number 1 is Mao. And then number 3 is Hitler. And then number 4, I think, is Pol Pot.
I think it's Pol Pot.
Well, then there's Mussolini. Mussolini, if a train was even a second late from pulling into the station, he would have the conductor executed.
I'm wondering how much that actually occurred. There's things.
Right. Like I just,
Mussolini was cool when he had political enemies. He challenged them to fencing duels. All right, that's cool.
Well, so did Abraham Lincoln. You should read
Andrew Jackson.
Andrew, he cheated.
A certain person here is actually partially named after him.
Wait, what?
Connell? You were not named after Andrew Jackson.
I was named after St. Andrew, but that's besides the point.
I was supposed to get the name Aaron, and then they said, "Well, what's the nickname for Aaron? It's gonna be Ron. We'll just call him Ronald." But no, they didn't even think about that, to be honest. But thank God Ronald Reagan came in. So
yes, let's send the Russians black licorice, black jelly beans, because I'll calm their asses down.
I will say this much is I think that when you go to the doctor, what is the doctor going to do to you if you start having dreams? He's probably going to give you drugs. Now, since the doctor was part of the rebellion, it's kind of like
True.
Oh, look, you got the disease of a soul.
Whoa.
But that's what I mean by that is you don't go to the doctor unless they think they can do something. In this case, he's not probably thinking of the surgery, the procedure until later, which I assume is lobotomized. The other part is
there really is no other
It's a form of
way to
lobotomy.
see that, especially back then when it was actually like a big deal. I mean, not a big deal, but very common.
Yeah.
The whole lobotomies were a big fad back then.
I don't think that it was a literal lobotomy, but I do think that it was an extension of that. It was the same general idea, but taken to its logical conclusion.
Clearly, they could have come up with all those centuries of progression. They would have come up with a more efficient method to destroy exactly
Because
it only started when the rebellion was going public. That was the only time, or going semi-public, and people were actually finding out about it. So they probably would have had this. They would have put it out as soon as they could, because the idea of removing people's humanity and freedom and imagination from their brain and removing the chance that it could ever happen is the greatest thing that could ever happen to this society. Turning humans into purely logical beings that will fall, as I said earlier, removing that factor, removing that possibility that something might go wrong, making that impossible would be perfect to the one state. So
I'm going to disagree with you
happened
here, because what you do is you get people that have no imagination or lack of thought. I mean, it sounds weird for a lot of this, but I think that was one of the reasons that they didn't want to use it, because at the end of the day, they wanted people that could think and still, while we joke about imagination, it was kind of how do I want to put this? The ideas were going to be put into their head through brainwashing, and like, oh, okay, we're going to do this, but they still want people to come up with innovative ideas on how to do it. It's because otherwise, I don't know.
I actually think imagination was a mistranslation.
Yeah, they would have never been able to build the starships to begin with.
Yeah.
I think they needed a little bit of it, but what they want to do is stop having people dream like we do with the, oh, well, let me think of this fantasy world and let me think of this. What they wanted them to do is focus purely on the task at hand and use their mathematical of, we're all going to go into space. And like, oh, okay, if I go into space, how can I do this and do that? And I think that's why they kind of avoided a lot, whether it's the procedure or drugs, is because, like Shadow's saying, you kind of don't get anyone that's useful afterwards. I mean, that's the hard thing about it.
That's what I was wondering when I got to that point, that we came up with this new solution, two drops of the stuff in this useless part of your brain. All your imagination is gone. You'll be happier people for it. And I'm like, so they don't want to continue building their plan, because the moment you get rid of imagination, science is dead. I mean, you kill,
I do think that imagination
not
was
necessarily science, because you could still follow the science as written down by the great scribes of days of old, but progress would be snuffed out in an instant, because there would be no desire to improve or question or challenge anything that was previously, chiseled into stone.
And if you listen to Jordan Peterson talk about stuff, and this actually happened also in, again, the Gulag Archipelago, because we're talking about Russia, is they talked about the engineers. And the engineers are like, oh, we've got a problem here. Here's how we're going to solve it. And instead of saying, yeah, you know what, we can fix it, it was, you're an enemy of the state because you're saying that the state has a mistake. And you're just like, hold on. And that's really what was killing a lot of the Russian aspects, is they were throwing engineers into these gulags. Now, sometimes they would keep them around, but they were throwing them into there because they would say, hey, you know what? We're having a problem with the water system over here. What I need X. And they said, well, because you're revealing state secrets and you're saying that the state is, what is it? What you're really doing is you're saying the bureaucracy is wrong because they're not giving you enough materials to do your thing, that you're an enemy of the state. That was the weird thinking that was going on in the 1930s.
I just want to know the scientists who came across the idea of implanting human heads on gorillas' bodies and brought this to Stalin. I just wanted to be the fly on the wall for this conversation.
Well, it's the same idea that you were getting from when you looked at H.G. Wells talking about the island of Dr. Moreau.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this isn't, the idea of transplanting organs between people. Well, if you can transplant the organs, why can't we transplant heads, or why can't we do this?
Oh yeah.
I also like the fact he was talking about chromosomes. I mean, he was a much more scientifically based writer than what we have nowadays. He had a much broader aspect.
I mean, the
thing.
closest I think we've gotten to the whole transferring a human's head on the gorilla's body is with the Umbrella Academy, and that's kinda. If you've ever read the graphic novel or seen the show on Netflix, but there's a lot of small aspects about this book that were just absolutely amazing, and we've talked about some of them. The math. They're using the math in it. I'm not a math guy. Yes, I use it in my day-to-day life, but I don't, there comes a point. If you want to know what society looks like without free will, well, here you go. Is echo chamber and groupthink a good idea? I don't know. Let's read this book. There's a lot of aspects that are, and written in 1921.
Oh, it's one of these things that comes all about, but it's the same.
Yeah.
That's what amazed me with this whole thing. It's just when you look at it, and then you look at how many of the different TV series, like books that came after, movies that came after, and how much of it all was stemmed from this. And you're just like,
the reason this was written was because the author saw the Leninist system, and he took one part of it that he saw as the worst part of it, and extended it out to the worst thing that it could possibly end up becoming, which is why, it's not this whole Stalin was the one who ruined communism. No, this was written during Lenin's early days. This wasn't when he was suffering through strokes and kind of losing his mind. No, this was Lenin at his prime, and he saw the effects of that and took the one part of it and brought it to its logical conclusion, which is the one state. And the idea we don't have freedom, we have unfreedom. Imagine living in freedom. Now, we have absolute happiness and absolutely no freedom or individuality. Well, no, we do have some individuality, but no freedoms.
But he didn't just, we talk about Lenin, but to be fair in some of this, I think what he did is he looked at all the science around him that was coming, because, a lot of this was coming over from Germany and everything else. Look at how big eugenics was.
If he had access to it.
The eugenics part of it, yeah, absolutely.
Well, they when you look at 1921, you had access to all of that information. It's only later when he was cracking down on it. When you really start looking at cracking down, they had to fight the White Russians. And then, who were the first people that the Bolsheviks went after? Were the Mensheviks, which were their allies, so they could get the ideological purity. But eugenics was big. You can go look at all the stuff going here in the United States. Eugenics was a huge thing. That's why it came out. Everyone thinks 1930s, but that goes way back. You can go read some of the Supreme Court.
Bless you.
Supreme Court. Go look at Margaret Sanger. All of these people talking.
Oh no! Don't look at Margaret Sanger. She's a monster.
Well, that's my whole point. Look at where eugenics was led to, and look at what they said, and it starts coming down to, and I think I can't remember if it was Holmes. It was one of them where they were talking about, we should sterilize prisoners. Not hey, these people need to have their own rights. Not because they did something. Said because they have undesirable elements in society, it's okay for us to use them as guinea pigs, instead of saying, not everyone that's in jail is a bad person.
It's amazing, and it's amazingly awesome that saltpeter didn't lead to impotentism, because how many in the armed services back in the day was fed saltpeter through their food?
And how many kids? Well, saltpeter was used for all sorts of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, I mean, for food preservation, it wasn't just the military. And how many kids did they normally have? 10, 20?
10, yeah.
Well, no, I mentioned it. Well, I say 20 is because my grandmother was one of 17 or 18.
Wow.
And
Well, going back to drugs, people are saying that the population in America is dropping. It's because of drugs. It's because of anti-depression medicine and things like that that are driving the concept of, in our economy, that's driving the concept of having a family just as like something I don't want to deal
the
with.
woke culture is the big one right now.
the
woke
I
culture
was-
is
Our society
antithetical
is
to
trying to
the
destroy
whole
that.
woke culture
yeah.
is completely antithetical to the family unit whatsoever. Marxism, the whole bit, they don't want that. They want the state.
Well, you don't
and
need
they
the
want-
family element to have kids. Trust me. All
Right,
you need,
but they're not
you need
doing
5
it,
minutes.
that's a huge portion of the current population that's rejecting having children at all. They're just like, we're too selfish. We don't want them. Let somebody else make that an issue. And the underlying logic and reasoning behind this is the fewer people you have to control, the easier it is to control it.
Well, here's the other part, and this is what they're mad at, is when you start hearing about feminism. Okay, the Rockefellers, why did they want that? They wanted that because I can't tax women that stay at home and do all of the domestic chores and then do their own labor for that. It's
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and when you start looking at it, look at how it's being promoted. And then I can say this specifically for my son's mother. She had our son when she was 39. And yeah. And then I talked to her a couple years later after we'd broken up, and she says, well, I wish I'd had 1 or 2 more. And see, that the problem is you're too late at that point. And
Yep.
Yeah, the thing is that
the-
like ideas like feminism and stuff, independence from the male patriarchy, these aren't they're not ideas that are natural. But more importantly, these things aren't what women really want. And I'm saying this because one, there's a quote, I don't remember from who, but from one of the major revolutionaries of the feminist movement and the sexual revolution. And she said, women should not be allowed to have the choice to be homemakers and mothers and housewives. They should not be allowed to have that choice, because if they are allowed to, too many will make that choice.
Well, I'm here's what gets me about it. I've dated some women in their 30s. I don't know what Shadow's experience was, but I talked to a lot of these women, and you can tell one is their standards have gone up, but the other point is that they can only have maybe 1 or 2 kids, and they wish they'd had them earlier. And that's
The amount of regret
Yeah.
that's being suppressed is astounding.
No,
Well,
I'm
hold
not
on,
saying all
hold
women
on.
want it. I'm just saying that women are being fed going to the workplace first.
My generation, right? Granted, I am as I said jokingly, I'm a disgruntled. No, I'm more. How did Finn put it? I'm basically I am a millennial, but I'm the grumpy old man millennial because I belong.
You're Gen Y. You're a Gen Y.
I am. Yeah. Anyways, geriatric millennial, as Way says. Growing up, this is what I was taught. You go to school, you go to college, you find your career in college. Then you find family. Then you start a family. Well, if you're going to college and really trying to get a career, you're looking maybe 25, 26 before you get married. All right, 25, 26. Let's do the math. 25. Okay, from 25 on, now you're trying to, in today's economy, trying to get a job, maybe not your forever job, but a career started. And you're trying to pay off your college loans, and you're trying to pay your apartment or your house. Most likely apartment in the very beginning of it. Then you're going to start trying to date. Then you keep adding on, and the time clock doesn't stop. You keep getting older and older and older, and our economy, the bills keep popping up. This is not a woke thing. This is not a women should not work. This is a survival thing.
In a way, it is. In a way, it is kind of a cultural Marxist, which I hate saying, but In a way, it is, because we've created a situation, an economy, a society where women are now being. It's not. Well, women should have the choice to be in the workplace. No, we're living in a time where women are being forced into the workplace. There are several women out there who they have a job and they have a career, but they don't want one. They don't want to do that. They want to stay at home with the kids, but they can't because they can't afford to.
Okay, no, hold
have
on.
a job.
I'm going to say something which people are forgetting about. Most women, even beforehand, worked, whether they were in Ireland or anything else. And I hate saying this, and a lot of people forget about this, is unless you lived on a farm, which you had lots of kids, a lot of women worked. You can find that throughout history of working in factories and everything else, and yet they would have 4 to 6 kids. But you know, just like this whole idea of all these things we have to have, we don't have to have most of these things. My ex and I just put this up there, $15K a year, which is what I give her for child support. That's what I give her, and yet that is, she can make it going through. Many women had those other aspects and skills for saving money, but we also have to remember we have Social Security, so people don't have to work for their future. The idea was,
well, we had Social Security. That doesn't exist anymore.
Well, you know what I mean. We have a Social Security which people are relying on, which is a bad idea. Whereas they used to rely on their kids to take care of them when they got older. That was your retirement plan. But even so, is
if you're good to your kids.
Well, I mean,
sorry, Dad, you're going into a home, but why? You know why?
I told my parents that. They came last week to go look for one, and then I told them that they need to spend more money on it. Like, well, we want to leave you something. I'm like, spend your damn money anyway. Stop being cheap. No, but you know, it's the things of we get caught up in such materialism, you know, that you go, is it really better? I mean, I know I buy tons of board games and stuff, but let's be honest, role-playing games are one of the cheapest ways of
entertaining yourself.
You don't have to buy a book. All you have to do is have one book amongst the entire group.
That's a fair statement, especially, I mean, when I started in 320.
Much to the disapproval of the bigger game companies, they absolutely hate that.
I only allow my players to have 2 books at the table. That's a hand. That's the
part
hand.
of the problem.
So I mean, you know, we would joke about it, but look at the basic.
Then you don't have more DMs.
Well, you know what? If I want to play a game, this is what I like about certain things. If I want to play a game, I'm the one that has to buy the book. I'm the one that has to go out. Okay, that's fine on me. But if you find a group just like you guys did with Card Index RPG, yeah, I know that's with Jade looking right over there.
He's like, yeah.
I mean, one is it's simple rules, but you only need one person to do it. And if character creation is really simple, which is what helped out with the old basic, I don't have to get the book to go figure out how to make a character. You know what? Well, 3d6, okay? And then the only person that really needs to look through the book regularly is the magic user to figure out what his spells do. That's about it. Everyone else can write it down on the sheet, and if you actually read the old Dungeons Master, they specifically say we don't want you to know the rules. The player should not even have access to Dungeon Master's guide.
Right. Well, for me, my Dungeon Master saying you couldn't even have the player's handbook was what made me a Dungeon Master. He said you can't look at. No, I tell you everything. I'm in, complete control. I went when he said things like that. I went out and got my player's handbook, and he was furious. He was so furious. It took me 2 weeks to save up mowing lawns and whatnot to get the player's handbook. Then it took me a little bit longer to get the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I worked twice as hard to do so because of the concept of I don't want you having this information. I don't want you blah, blah, blah. That's what caused me to, become a Dungeon Master and a better one than who taught me, and to go after all that information to be able to understand the game, to know what was really going on. The idea that you can't have this.
Well, I don't
It just
mind
feeds
if my
into-
characters, if I'm sitting at a table and I'm running for people, I don't mind if they have the DM cheat because I will make mistakes. And if you got that the rule lawyer, they whatever. It's the monster manual and it's the bestiarity that I don't want them to want. I don't want them to know the final HP or what the attacks look like. But I say two books.
I get that. I get that. With the Pathfinder game we're playing, I've got the PDF of the whole book. I have not looked once at the monster section because I don't want to know. I know that I don't want to know that stuff because that takes away. But not letting the players want to, if they want to go that route and they want to learn that stuff, then you have created another dungeon master. You've created someone who then someday will DM for you because trust me, having not really dungeon mastered in a good long time now, I am absolutely loving the concept of, yeah, I'm just going to kick back and enjoy the ride, do what I can do to be the character, the player, and not have to, fret over all the other, minutia that we used to have to worry about as a dungeon master.
And
if it was my game company, I would encourage everybody to have all the books. I mean, it only makes sense from a marketing standpoint to get every one of your players on board with buying every book. That's the way it used to be. Now they're wondering why they're floundering is because people have got to the point where, a $50 book, I'm not going to buy that $50 book because I don't need it. Well, without the needing, you also diminish the want of the creation of new, good dungeon masters.
Really quick, Jack, I'm sorry that we jump topics. We do that a lot here.
I know.
Before we go any further into the freedom that is gaming, game creates intelligent thought processing, in my opinion. Well, sometimes. Anyways, so is there anything else you want to talk about the book really quick? The only thing I have to say is I didn't like the ending. I wanted a nuclear bomb to go off, the rocket to blow up, and just wipe everybody off the map.
I really didn't understand the ending. I must have missed the point where it just
he got a bomb. They got hold of him. They injected him with the no more free will potion. Operation. He saw his first time and only time love interest, and a few other people get carted up. Tortured for information, and he's just sitting there happier than a dog in his own shit with his thumb up his ass. That's how the book ended to me.
What happened afterwards is
about it. I just felt that he did the right thing, but I don't think that he felt happy. I mean, he was content.
He was content in his non-free.
What happened in the end was they're all being carted off, but part of the wall fell. Not the entire wall didn't fall, but part of it broke. And there were a bunch of people that did not want the operation, the anti-vaxxers or whatever. And there was an open revolution against the government. And the one state was entering essentially a period of civil war, where the last line of the book, at least the translation that I listened to, was like, there's battles raging on the far side of the city. And I don't know exactly what he said, but the last sentence is, like, I hope we win. No, I'm certain then we will win because reason always wins. Something along those lines.
This is a precursor to the Borg.
Yeah, because he says he's certain, but again, he's now back to how he was at the beginning of the book, which is a complete pretentious dickhead.
Yeah, resistance is futile.
But what's interesting about that is we're saying that there's fighting, and I always wonder about this: how many of the people are trying to leave the city, and how many are and the government trying to stop them? Because we are talking about Russia, and
yes,
what I find very interesting when you read the Gulag Archipelago, and I never understood this. To me, if you don't want to be part of the society, get the hell out. But for them, if you left, they got incensed.
They went after your family. They went after your friends.
Think about all the defectors of that era. After World War II into the Cold War, the defection was like the worst thing you could ever do because of what they perceived as what kind of a threat you could be to help educate the rest of the world of what atrocities were going on in the motherland.
Well, here's what got me. One is, and I've heard this is because a lot of, which is true nowadays still, journalists were generally pro-communist sympathies, and so were the academics. So, like one guy, there was a ship, and he stayed on the outside of the ship, and they kept searching for him and searching for him and searching for him for an entire week until finally they realized, well, we can't hold the ship forever. And they let him go. He gets on the ship, and then he notifies everyone in Great Britain, and they ignore it. This is what gets me about it, is they would lure people back. Like, if you left, like, to me, if you're in Russia, it's like, well, you can never come back, would be my opinion. But instead, they would say, oh, no, everything's fine, come home. And then they would kill them or send them off. There was a weird control. I mean, you can see it nowadays, which I just never understood, is why do you want to have them come home? Just say, you know what? You're no longer part of our society. You can, you can
It's
never.
the last ditch effort of control. It's Stockholm syndrome.
Well, Stockholm is if the person who's in it doesn't think so. But
that's fair.
What amazes me, and you can see it nowadays,
yeah.
These politicians, why do you care what other people think? Take care of yourself. But they're like, oh my God, I'm freaking out because someone in Idaho might not agree with what I say and they should be punished. And you're like, why? How does that benefit you? That's a waste of resources. It's more of like, you know what? Thank you for leaving Idaho. We'll just turn wherever we are, into our utopia. And it's like, but no, it's like they lured people back in the 30s to come home saying everything was fine. You're welcome back. Nothing will happen to you, just so they could throw him back in the gulag. And I went, what was
that Robin Williams movie back in the 80s where he played a Russian?
Moscow on the Hudson.
Yeah. I mean, just there's movies like that. Then you read like everything that went on after World War II, and they built the wall in East Germany.
Well, you want to know something even more interesting, which is I love Gulag Archipelago. It's a well-written book, but man, it takes a lot of effort to get through.
Tolkien?
Yeah, but I mean, I still enjoy Tolkien too. But here's what gets me about it. All those soldiers that fought in the West, that went into Germany for the war, ended up in a gulag. Every one of them.
Mm.
And yet the people who didn't go to fight, that stayed at home, were the ones that stayed out. That's the weird thing about this.
What does James L. have to say? Our Australian buddy. Yeah.
I'm looking at that.
Comments this whole time.
It's different. I agree with it if it's a voluntary co-op. I know that the chat, you talked about this, talking about games again. Is you're like, well, the communist view of the group. Well, no offense, if we're a common gaming group and we go through everything, my healing potion is your healing potion because I need you to survive. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. I just ask you to let me know when you borrow my equipment.
My sword is your sword. Just don't lose it.
Yeah, well, I mean, look. If I'm knocked unconscious and I have the Vorpal sword, I expect you to pick it up. Okay, I really do, and use it.
I expect you to pick it up and throw it away because it's fucking useless. Having rolled 2 nat 20s, 3 nat 20s, or whatever.
No.
Well, that's new. In the old days, if you rolled a 20 or even a 17, depending on the thing, it was automatic. Just done deal.
I wonder if they changed that back in 5e. I don't know. 3?
They changed it in 3.0.
They changed it in 3.0. All right.
So guaranteed. And a sword of sharpness, I think you needed a 19 or a 20. But it was just, that's just it. You're done.
Is that what keen? Did keen turn it? Does sharpness turn into keen?
No, sharpness is what became Vorpal.
Because keen, all you needed was 18 and up.
They basically split it away. So the old Vorpal became 2 different enchantments, both keen and Vorpal at the same time.
Okay, and didn't stack.
So the old D&D had a sword of sharpness, and then the Vorpal sword was the next step above.
And no, that wasn't the voice of God. That is Jade. I'm hanging out at his tavern for all those in chat. Uh,
Well, but that's what I'm referring to for some of these is the whole thing of but that's different than when another gaming group comes over and steals my stuff. Hey, no, that's not ours. It's when we're talking about the little co-op, when we're in a group of, and I'm going to assume 4. If you could get a bigger group, that'd be fine. Now, if everyone's going in and out every game like the old D&D used to, no,
Yeah.
this is mine. This is
Yeah.
mine because we're not part of the same group. But if we're in the same group every time that we play, look, dude, you need a potion of healing. Just let me know so I can go buy one or I can get one. We'll share whatever's there. Because we're friends. We're not just adventuring companions. This is our life and death, and I expect you to tell me
when I
what's going
jumped
on.
in with 3.5, I was with maybe 6 other people plus the DM, and we had one guy, but basically more or less most of the time was a DM that had several crates of D&D books that he just places. Like, if you need to look something up, it's right there. Make sure it gets back when you're done. But hey, I need a handbook. Okay, it's right over here. I need whatever. It's right over there. And it wasn't until Pathfinder that I started my collection, which now I'm thinking I probably shouldn't have bothered, but that's just me.
But that's what I like, and I agree with James Ellis. Yeah, it's different if we're playing miniatures. You're not gonna, if it's just 2 of us playing a miniature war game, I don't think you can steal my miniatures. But if I'm in a public place, all of a sudden I'm going to make sure they're all marked down, and I know these are mine, and I count them every time.
Really quick, I kind of want to jump back to the book really quick. I just want to say,
no, go for the back.
Jack, this was a great choice. I can't. If you stay in this lane of thought processing, not dollar store specials, I can't wait till your next choice. If you go back to dollar store, I might be taking a flight to California to pick you up by your scrawny neck, ask you why, but why are you doing this to me?
Well, I'm not sure yet.
So Matt told me about this book. Jack, I had never heard of it. It was a great book to read. I recommend anyone read it. It's not a long book at all.
No.
It
was even funny how the author mentioned the page count in the book toward the end. I actually found that rather amusing. It reminded me of the classic Board of the Rings, and if you have not read it, if you've not read the Harvard Lampoon's Board of the Rings.
Well, today was good. I'm gonna head out.
Yeah, he didn't like the first page of Board of the Rings, but Board of the Rings is actually what the first thing I read when it came to anything like Tolkien. It's what actually inspired me to want to read Tolkien, because it was so irreverent and so just over the top ridiculous in a spoof of Lord of the Rings back when I was actually reading things like Mad Magazine and what have you.
Oh, I love Mad Magazine, yeah.
And if you can ever get a chance to get a hold of it, especially because I read it before Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but if you can read it afterwards, you will probably enjoy it. Being able to read it prior to that is probably not really an option for anybody these days because of how popular Tolkien is. It's probably quite hard to find a copy of Board of the Rings, but yeah, it was. I was lucky in that respect of getting to read something like that first. Because it made it that much more entertaining.
Well, I watched the Lord of the Rings movies before I sat down. I tried to make it through The Hobbit as a kid, and that book kept my ass to sleep each and every damn time. Talk about dry books. But watching the movies, because I basically have the movies printed out in my head, scene by scene, and listening to the books, it's interesting the difference between the two. I'm not saying one's better or worse.
I'll say it for you. The book's better. I almost can't watch the movies anymore.
It's a different medium. It's a different medium. So
it's a different medium
for it.
I get it, but it's so. In many cases, it's so disrespectful. It's almost like reading Lord of the Rings. I guarantee you, Tolkien would have edited all of the scenes I hate.
You know what though here's what gets me about it is I think that he did a better job as far as pacing than Tolkien did. Why, that the whole thing of, and this is what always gets me. I know he threw stuff in there, but Tom Bombadil adds nothing to it. In fact, he takes away from the movie, but anyway, takes away from the books.
Oh God, he drove me up the damn wall.
That's why you got to read Lord of the Rings. If you read
I am reading Lord of the Rings.
No, bored.
Bored.
Tom Bombadil will become one of the characters that makes you laugh out loud the most.
I wanted to know what drug he was on.
That's the whole point. He was the equivalent of the quintessential 1960s drug-addled hippie. Yes. Okay. It was freaking hysterical. Even at my age, which was about 12 years old, I understood every line of it and understood exactly what what the Harvard Lampoon was trying to parody and equate to Tom Bombadil. He was the freaking. It was just so much better, and it'll allow you to get through those hard parts of Tolkien because you can look back on Lord of the Rings and go, "Oh yeah, that was better," or "That was funnier," this way. That's my perspective.
Let's see. I'm sure Shadow remembers these. I remember the old, the Hobbit the movie, which I enjoyed as a kid, and then I remember seeing both Return of the King and the cartoon and the Lord of the Rings, which was the Bakshi version.
The rotoscope version.
Yeah.
That one bothers me.
Up to about Saruman. And then they did Return of the King under the basket, and the same one that did The Hobbit. And there were certain things I actually like better about the Lord of the Rings cartoon, which is the one thing that bugged the hell out of me in the movie, which was the one little area, which was so important, was the fact that when he talked about the black sails, and he says, and you understand why Denethor jumped off and killed himself, was when he said, all of it, because if the black sails had moved up, they had taken care of all of Gondor when they sail up to Minas Tirith. And you understand when Denethor was looking through the Palantir and he saw the black sails, he said, "Oh my God, the Hamdrad? It's over." And you understand why he jumps. And this was the point of the Palantir, is it shows you things, but it doesn't show you everything. And when Aragorn, along with the host, comes out, that was the savior, and that's why. And yet, if he had just seen that part, he wouldn't have killed himself. That made the. I'm sorry. Have you gotten to that part yet, there, Connell?
No, I am at the ant mute. Which, if I have to listen to another fucking treant sing, I'm gonna stab somebody with this right here. I'm gonna have a John.
You gotta remember it. When it was written, it was such a vastly different time, and don't forget this was written by a man who had just seen the worst atrocities. You cannot blame him for wanting to create such an idyllic, peaceful, lovable world that was so vastly different from what he had just gone through.
So you're also forgetting something, because I know you have not read Cimmeryl.
Not all of it.
So the world of Middle Earth was created through song.
Right, yeah.
Like the whole magic system relies upon music and song and spoken and lyrical. So the fact that the treants sing and then the books are filled with songs and people singing about it's because the world is built by music.
It makes sense. I'm just saying, I rather shove this through my fucking ear than listen about the ant wives one more damn time.
Okay, so Connell, the one part that helped me get through it, and I'm not saying this is good for you, is I could actually hear the songs in my head, or I'd make them up, based on whenever you did the little song.
Especially when you watch the cartoon, when you watch the cartoon, find the songs that are being sung in the cartoon. Find the lyric sheets in the paperback or whatever book you have, and watch how wonderfully Glenn Yarborough translated them into song, and realized that this guy had no coaching from Tolkien to do it, but yet the music in the Hobbit cartoon is
Actually,
spot
I
on,
just got done
absolutely
watching
perfect.
the Hobbit cartoon last
And
night.
those songs were perfect.
Oh yeah, Goblin Town, boom, 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 the Goblin Town. Oh no, absolutely great. I had no problem.
Not just the cool songs like "Where There's a Whip, There's a Way," but some of the other songs that are more cheery, etc.
Yeah.
Trust me, someday you're gonna write a book, and you're gonna understand. Yeah, you're gonna understand, having seen the shit you saw, that you're gonna want to write about a place that has none of that.
That's
and
fair.
that only leaves you. That's going to leave you with something that's a lot more fairy tale-esque. Because let's face it, that's what Tolkien was doing. He was writing a fairy tale for. At the beginning, the Hobbit fairy tale was for kids, and then the Lord of the Rings was for grown-ups, but yet still being a fairy tale, or what we would recognize as a fairy tale.
That being said, we're about 10 minutes left, and I am being hosted by somebody else. This is why my background actually looks nice and not crap everywhere. With that being said, next week we will be talking about The Hobbit, the animated movie that you guys are already talking about. I enjoyed it. I can't wait talking to you guys about it. I love the animation and whatnot. But that's what we're doing next week. Shadow, what are you doing this coming week?
Well, this afternoon, this evening, we've got a painting video. Monday, I don't know if the little guy wants to do a mailbag or not, because we got some stuff in the mail that we need to show off, because that's what we do when we get mail, is we show it off. Hopefully Max's package will arrive by then, as well as we've got a package from James L. that's been sitting on our desk for a couple of months, and something else we want to show off. Tuesday will be... What is Tuesday? I don't even remember what we're doing Tuesday. Wednesday, Gatekeepers. Thursday, Table Breakers, along with our regular videos, depending on the holiday. Friday, hanging out with Max and all the gang. And Saturday, usual routine of Bruce's game, Sci-Fi Shadow Chat, Nathan Allen's Quantum Show, and starting all over again. But we do roughly 1 or 2 videos a day, so there's always some.
Now that being said, and I know, Jack, your vacation for Thanksgiving is what, maybe a couple days, and you have to go back to school.
A week.
A week.
Yeah.
I'm putting this down now. The second to either Christmas break, we're knocking out Dresden Files.
Okay. I will have you know, though, that during the majority of Christmas break, not the majority, but I think starting roughly around the 17th, which is not during break, I think my break extends past, or my school extends past the 17th, but around then, we have some friends coming over, possibly around that time, and we're just going to be really busy with that. So I do want to get Dresden, hopefully. But I do want to get Dresden done. I'd almost say that we should do it next after The Hobbit is when we should do it.
I'll tell you what, because this coming weekend is Thanksgiving weekend, and I don't know what my weekend's going to look like, let's put a hold to next week. Let's do The Hobbit the following week. And if you have time, start reading Dresden. Next Sunday I'm not gonna do anything. I don't want to do anything next Sunday because it is the weekend of Thanksgiving, and I think I do actually now that I'm thinking about it, I think I already have plans with my daughter. So I didn't want to hold off on this week because this was your pick. The only reason I want to hold off next week, it is mine. I'm taking, plus I'm the host of the show, so I'm taking a host rights.
We're going to watch The Hobbit anyways. We're going to watch The Hobbit next week.
No, watch The Hobbit. I'm not telling you not to. But next Sunday, there's not going to be any show. Then the following week, we'll do Hobbit. Then we'll do Starship Troopers at some point next month if we want to. I think that should be on the list of next books. I really, really enjoy the route that we're going with this show, with the books and the movies that were written well. and I won knockout Dresden. Then I'm looking forward to your next pick, Shadow, and our Jack and Omenal. I do want to throw Starship Troopers, maybe at the end of the month, maybe like New Year's around that week. If that works for you guys.
Hey, guys. Would you mind if I did something a little bit different during December for my pick?
Yeah, go for
What
it.
do you want?
Yeah.
Twilight Zone.
The movie or the show?
No, the original black and white TV show. I want to pick one episode, and then everybody else come back with their favorite episode
Okay.
of the show. And my pick is Night of the Meek because.
So we all watch different episodes. We're not required to watch the same episode.
Only the one, Night of the Meek.
Night of the Meek. Okay.
So I think that's really cool. I would still like to do Doctor Strangelove if we're going to be in this whole.
Well, when it's your turn, I got no problem with that, and I don't care when because my turn is my turn after the Hobbit.
It would. Well, there's now 5 of us, and there's only 4 weeks in a month, so we'll make it work.
Okay. As long as we do the Twilight Zone during Christmas, because Night of the Meek is the Christmas episode.
See, I was expecting to pick the Bill Murray's Scrooge.
Oh, you're right. I wanted to pick Scrooge. Oh, shit.
Well, no, hold on.
You're right. I did.
There's another one I like is the Outer Limits version where they have it on Christmas where the guy shoots up a bunch of people.
I didn't get.
I haven't seen that one.
To watch.
It was the modern one.
Tell you what, guys, we have 2 weeks. We got 2 weeks to figure out what Shadow wants to do next. If it's Scrooge with Bill Murray, that's awesome.
I forgot about Scrooge. Yeah.
Oh, Scrooge is great for that whole thing. Well, the little antlers won't stay on top. Well, have you tried to staple them up?
But anyways, for those in chat, thank you for joining us. I look forward to reading you guys' comments next week. Wesley, James, Fat Gamer, and whoever else texts. I want everybody out there to have a good holiday. If you're in a country that doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving, have something special on Thursday anyways, because you deserve it. Happy holidays and go fuck off.
Oh,
Bye.
and wait a minute. One last thing. Despite what everyone says, when I was in Iraq, they made Christmas a national holiday in Iraq. So all this idea that, you're leaving them out. No. If I was in a place where they make it, so this whole idea that Christmas is exclusionary, fuck you. Anyway, now you can say
yeah. One of my friends is a
happy holidays
week, everybody, and God bless.
Happy holidays.
Yeah.
Go fucking hang out with your family.
Yeah.
Bye.